modeling again good team support here in the School of Social Work. Um, Thank you all for being here today. This is our first teaching circle. Enable. Okay, here we go. First teaching circle for the year. And today we're lucky to have people from the Office of Disability Services with us. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We also have Arlene Hunter here, who also helps us play a role in this process as well. But Carly, I'm going to turn it over to you guys for introductions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Carly Andrews, and I'm the Senior Director of the Office of Disability Services here in New Brunswick. But I do work very closely with the Disability Services offices at the other campus and also oversee the database that all of our campuses share. And I will let Nikki introduce herself.
Sure. My name is Nikki Michelle. I'm a coordinator here. Been working with the Office of Disability Services for 5 years now. So that is who I am. And I know some of you on the grid and some who might not be, but I'm glad to meet everyone who's here today.
That's great. Okay, so these are all of our faculty, some of our faculty here, and recording for those who aren't here. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys get started. What we talked about was a very brief kind of overview from ODS, and then we're going to open up to some questions because I think the questions are going to lead to more discussion. So Carly, I'll let you take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we have just about, I would say, 10 minutes worth of information that we wanted to talk through just to make sure that everyone, for those of you who are new, that you know about our office and how students get connected with our office. And somebody asked, what does on the grid mean? We in our office anyway, call this the grid. All of us that are here. So sometimes in our office, rather than saying see you later or see you in the office, we say see you on the grid because we'll see someone in our next Zoom meeting. So that's how we use it in our office. But I wanted to start just by giving some very basic statistics about our office because we definitely have grown, especially for those of you who may have worked with us for a while. We are currently working with over 3,000 students. That's both graduate and undergraduate with any range of major from professional to a liberal arts major. We are currently working with a majority of undergraduate students, even though we work with grad students as well. We currently have about 500 graduate students that we're working with, and we're working with over 150 from the School of Social Work directly. So just to give you a sense of what we're seeing. We do pull data on what students self-report in terms of the disability that they have. And for the first time this past year, because I run it basically in our last fiscal year, we actually had for the first time ever, the majority of students, over 50%, report a psychological condition as one of their disabilities. I will also say that the majority of students who report disabilities report more than one. So they're reporting perhaps a psychological condition and then maybe also a learning disability to go along with that. So that's just some basic statistics of the students that we see. And Nikki's going to give you a brief overview of what it looks like for students to actually connect with our office.
Sure. It's a very individualized process. The student story is key to it, along with documentation from a licensed professional that supports what their story is. And it is also reviewed by a group of people. So not just one coordinator making decisions. So there's a lot of thought that goes into helping us understand the student's lived experience and how that relates to the classroom. And it's very different. So one student can come forth with this condition and it might look and feel very different than a student experiences that. So students might want to register with our office, or they might want to just, inquiry. So we have those two different options, and I'll put in the chat here, getting registered. So students who might not be comfortable yet, they're wondering, what is ODS? Does it fit for me? What are accommodations? They might send in an inquiry, just ask a question. And we'll get back to them with, here's the question. Or students who are more confident or want to register, they're identifying. So the difference between K through 12, they're coming forth and say, I identify as a person with a disability. They do that through registering with our office and say, hey, this is me, and I'd really like to talk about X, Y, and Z. So once that is done, that starts the process. So they are assigned a coordinator, such as myself, so a point person, someone to help them navigate through until they graduate, of, okay, what makes sense, what might be reasonable. And we are one part of the puzzle. Good thing they chose Rutgers. There's different resources to be part of the support team. So they register, they have a coordinator, and then I say, hey, let's meet, let's talk about what that is. We have that intake that you might be familiar with, and meeting someone for the first time, getting their background, the history, what it is for them. The student always sends in documentation. So what is this? What is the licensed professional saying? If it's more than one thing, where's the information that says that, so we can clearly see what that is? What's the history of it? What are other people saying? So it's been going on for at least 6 months. It's chronic. This isn't going to change. And so we look at those two. Does it link up? We learn more from the documentation. And then we think about, okay, how does that link to the accommodation? If you're asking for note-taking or exams, what's that functional limitation? How is that fitting into that? So we're taking that into consideration. And we go to a case review. So that is a model that's shared by other professions. When you're thinking about an individual person and the decisions that you're making, coming forth in a group, because different minds built that strength, and maybe I missed something or I'm not thinking about it the same way. So a committee makes that decision. There's an outcome, and it's either approved, denied, or maybe I didn't ask something clearly enough. I need to get some more information. And so that happens. And then they're approved, and then we use the letters of accommodation that you're looking for in your classrooms to receive, because that's their formal documentation that says, hey, I'm registered with ODS, and these are the accommodations that have been approved. And then a coordinator's name is on the bottom. So that's their person that they're assigned to. And again, we have grown, so there's new names that you will be seeing out there. And of course, if you work with Newark and RBHS, Camden, our coordinators at the different campuses as well. So we are out there everywhere. So trying, and it's growing for sure. Our numbers are up. So I sigh, yeah. And so we're out there working with students, and that's the process. We try to make it online so that people who want, for the ease and convenience of that, online forms. You can visit us in person. I'm here again, getting back to being on campus, what that is. So we're in the office, we're on Zoom, we're via phone, we are via chat on our website. That was our virtual door, if you will, during the pandemic. Check us out on chat, and you're able to ask a question that way as well. So that is the process, and what we're doing to actually come forth that results in that letter of accommodation, what goes into that and the thought process for that. And I told the student today, it's not a once and done. Things change and they can always come back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. And I know we don't have a PowerPoint or anything because we wanted this to be very informal, but I am going to share my screen for just a minute, just to make sure that I highlight for you one of the things that Nikki just talked about. So are all of you seeing the Office of Disability Services website? Fabulous. So it's in edit mode right now. I apologize. I'm literally editing content this morning. But this is our basic website. We try and make it as easy as possible to find the things that students need right on our front page. But for you as a faculty member, I wanted to make sure that I highlight this chat live with ODS button in the lower right-hand corner. If that says chat live, it does mean that there is a full-time staff member behind that button. It's not an intern, it's not a student, it is a full-time staff member that's going to be answering your questions. And that chat feature was really designed for not just students, but also to be used by parents, by staff, by faculty, just as an easy way to get connected with our office and ask any questions that you might have. So please definitely feel free to use that if you just have a quick question that you want to get answered.
Yeah.
Like Nikki said, once the student gets the LOA, one of the things that gets approved, that next step is the LOA. And so one of the things that we launched last spring was actually a faculty portal that will store all of your LOAs for you, your letters of accommodation. And so when a student places that request, what you as a faculty member will be receiving is an email that does have a copy of the letter attached, but then it will also have a link to access the faculty portal. When you log into that for the first time, it basically, by you clicking on that link and entering your net ID and password, it essentially links you up to our system and will then enable you to continue to go back into that, logging in using your net ID and password to be able to see all the students in your classes that might have an LOA. If that's ever something that you have questions about, please feel free to you can either contact the coordinator that's on the letter itself, or contact our main office, or quite frankly, contact me directly. We really implemented this because we wanted it to be easier for students and we wanted it to be easier for faculty. So if there is feedback that you have or questions that you have, please be sure to let me know. We actually just launched some improvements to the portal based on feedback from faculty. So your feedback is welcome and we take it and we use it. One of the things that faculty shared is it would be really great if we could see what percentage of extra time my student has right in the portal itself. So we actually just launched that last week, where when you log in, you should now be able to see 50%, 100%, rather than needing to open up the letter and look at it that way. So we're constantly trying to figure out ways that we can evolve and make this process as easy as possible for everyone that's involved. One of the things that we really encourage students to do is once they share their LOA and have it sent to you is to request to have a conversation about how those accommodations are actually going to be implemented. I would encourage you to not wait. So if you've received an LOA and it's been a few days or a week and you haven't heard from the student, I would really encourage you to reach out to them and say, hey, I'd really like to have a conversation about how we're going to implement this. Meaning, how is additional time going to be applied? If they have an accommodation such as absences or extensions on assignments, what is that going to look like? And just making sure that you're setting aside a time to have that conversation in private. So really avoid having it maybe right before or right after class when there might be other students around who could overhear the substance of that conversation, because some students may not be comfortable with other students knowing that they're registered with our office. And, again, like Nikki said, if you have any questions when you're reading through a student's letter of accommodation, if you have any questions about how those accommodations should be implemented, you absolutely can reach out to the coordinator at the bottom of the letter or through our chat to try and get some assistance with that, because we're here to support you as faculty just as much as we are here to support students. And I think that sometimes that's a misunderstanding about our office. I think sometimes our office is seen as your student support, and that's absolutely not true. We are here to support the entire university community because, quite frankly, while we're the ones approving these accommodations, you all are the key in actually making sure that they're implemented appropriately. And so we're here to support you in making sure that you're able to do that to the best degree possible. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is field work. We do also work with students who need accommodations in a field placement, and we'll work with them on a one-on-one basis to do that. Sometimes students aren't always thinking about that when they initially meet with us. And so if you're working with a student who's entering field work and is talking about the possibility of needing accommodations, please make sure that they connect with us, because that absolutely can be a conversation that we're having with them to make sure that we're setting up anything that might be needed for them while they're in field work. So that is the basic gist of the information that we had to share with all of you. So if you have any questions, Nikki and I are happy to answer any questions that you have either via the chat or if you want to ask them out loud.
And we do have some.
Go
chat.
ahead.
Yeah.
Yep.
So someone's looking at their letters and doesn't see a link to the faculty portal. Can you please provide the link? and someone's having trouble accessing the portal, it says they should receive an email.
Yep, so I will actually email both of you directly, only because the link that I have, if you click on it and you have not already associated yourself with the portal last semester, it's going to cause some major issues. So I will send Marian, I'll send you that link directly so that you have that. Because I believe that you probably already had students last semester and had already linked yourself to the portal. So I'll send you an email for that.
And Dr. Hubbard was wondering about the LOAs, and you receive LOAs shortly after they request them. So I'm a student who has accommodations. It's my responsibility to request that letter. And then we compose the letter here and it gets sent to the student and to the professor at the same time. You know, it's the start of school now, so we're doing our best to keep up in a timely manner. We say that it takes 3 to 5 days once a student has requested it. That's how it usually is sent out. So you're notified when the student is notified. And again, students receive accommodations all throughout the year. This is when the big push is on. But students are still registering with us, so you might receive it. But in essence, you'll get it once the student requests it.
And I will also say that when we came back from the Labor Day weekend, we had about 1,500 requests, and there are 2 full-time and 2 part-time people that are processing those requests. So we have been furiously working away at that as quickly as possible over the last few days. But there are still quite a few for us to get through. So know that they are going to be coming throughout this week and into next probably.
Dr. Lewis, you had a question?
No, you clarified it. I just want to understand the process that students have to come in and request the LOA, and then they also have to say it has to be sent to the professor, so that they identify the professor they want to send to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the way that that works is that it's actually an online form that when the student goes in, their classes are actually populated for them as long as they've logged in with their NetID. And so they just select which classes they'd like it sent to. They enter in the professor name and email. And then once our office has a chance to process that request, it will get sent to the student and the faculty at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Marian, again, if you have class today, if they say they have accommodations, they have to request that letter. And if they did, it could be still in the process. If you didn't receive any, they could have requested it and it just hasn't been composed yet, or they could not have requested it. So it's somewhere in between, depending on what that is. But we'll say on positive side, they requested it, they're on top of it, and it just hasn't been completed yet, in the works. But again, if it gets too long and you don't get it, then might they check with their coordinator to see see what might be the delay.
And Rachel, did you have a question?
Yeah, so question/comment, I guess, just about, because I'm just gonna use this space to be able to say this about an accommodation that I've seen. So Carly, I work with our instructional design team for our online courses. And I've worked with Nikki a lot. Some folks have been forwarding to me and to our instructional designers, and just kind of like a note to faculty about videos in courses requiring captioning or transcription. And so I've gotten some like panicked emails at times from people saying like, I don't have time to transcribe all of these things. So I just wanted to like make a note that for anyone like teaching at school social work, we have the capabilities to do that. We've been reviewing all of our online courses to ensure that there's captions and transcripts so that our courses are accessible. So I guess just like my comment is like for faculty that might get that type of accommodation. And I did see in one of the more recent messages, it did say like, your instructional designer can help with that. So thank you for adding that language, because I think that is helpful. But just like, please come to me or come to our EdTech email and we'll help with that. If you're making additional videos for your courses and you don't know how to do the captioning, like I have instructions, like we're going to do some workshopping on that later this semester as well. But like all of our online courses, even the on the ground ones that have like content in them, they all should have those things there. And if they're not there, our instructional design team will get them there for everyone. So just kind of like, sorry. So kind of a, not really a question, but I just wanted to like share with folks that like, because I have gotten this like panicked, like, how do we do all of this? Or like, I can't go through this. And I'm like, no one's expecting anyone to do that. We've got the supports built in on our ID team. And then I guess just for Carly and Nikki and ODS folks to like know, like, I'm happy to be a point person like for all things online courses to ensure that they are accessible.
That's so exciting. Thank you so much for that plug. That is excellent news. And yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that you brought that up, Rachel, because I think that something else to really highlight as well is that when you are doing virtual meetings with students, you can see today, Patricia actually turned on the captioning for the Zoom meeting. The auto captioning in Zoom is not perfect, but for some students, it can make a world of difference in their ability to access the content. So I'd really encourage you when you are having meetings to turn the captioning feature on so that the people who would like to use it can. And if there is ever a student truly who is deaf or that needs more accurate captioning in your course, that is something that we will provide and we will make sure is in your course. So that's not something you need to worry about, but students who are just English as second language students who may have a slight hearing impairment but aren't fully deaf, like the captioning can really make a big difference for them. Yeah, Dr. Hubbard, did you have a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to just make sure that I am using the right language. So two things. One thing, when I have a student give me the accommodation letter, sometimes they are saying other things to accommodate for. And so I go to say to them, you need to make sure everything you need is in your accommodation letter. So that's one. I want to make sure I'm accurate with that. Number two, the second thing is, so some students, sometimes I've experienced in the past, have an accommodation letter, but they don't always give it to the professor. And so I've had some students give me the accommodation like mid-semester or towards the end. And I say to them, so now your accommodations will start. It's not retroactive. And I want to make sure I'm using the right language here with this because
You could join our office tomorrow.
well, I've had many calls with Nikki clarifying in emails because I'll have students with different types of accommodations, and I want to be very clear on the implementation side of it, especially when you're teaching online and you have the discussion that they need to actively participate in. But I just wanted to make sure. So my language is okay. That's still the language that we're utilizing. Okay.
It is perfect.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. We really encourage students to get their letters, request them as soon as possible at the beginning of the semester. Even if they don't think that they'll need to use it, we'd rather them request it, have it in, and at least have that conversation up front to make sure that that's something that they really should not be giving it to you middle of the semester, end of the semester. And if they are, you're absolutely right. They are not retroactive.
And things that we do to communicate with students, we have a monthly newsletter that goes out. We have our website, we have a Twitter account. I think every beginning of the semester, we're emailing folks to say, hey, it's the start of the semester. We realize that people are busy or they're maybe used to communicating with you and maybe they forget about the LOA. If they can just get in that habit of doing that, and anything, you think that we can do on our end, that's always a challenge of making sure they're reading emails.
So I'm just want to emphasize, Margaret asked a question in the chat about if a student indicates that their medical condition prevents them from coming to class, do we have to enable them to Zoom in? My short answer is no. We have probably less than a half a dozen students through our office this semester that we have approved for the accommodation of remote attendance. But knowing when we approve that, that does not mean any class that the student wants to take, they're going to be able to do it remotely. When we approve that accommodation, we work very closely with the leadership of the school that the student is in to figure out, okay, what classes does the student still need to take? what classes can be done remotely. And it may turn out that if the student truly cannot come to class ever in person for a semester, maybe they can only take 1 or 2 classes. They're not able to take a full load of classes for this semester. And so I would encourage you, though, that, thinking about how are you accommodating any student? So certainly COVID is still a thing. Students still need to stay home sometimes if they're being symptomatic. And so, are you allowing flexibility for any student of, okay, throughout the semester, if you do get sick, if you do have COVID, if you do need to miss class, here's the policy for that, and here's how we're going to handle that. But yeah, if a student is asking for, hey, I want to Zoom in, and that's not something that you would normally do, you absolutely don't need to do that. Brian, did you have a question? And then we'll get to the rest of the questions in the chat.
Hi, yes. So, thank you for having this meeting, first of all. I wanted to see if you could possibly speak about what accommodations for field would look like. Obviously, when I'm placing a student, I try to get to know them and any challenges that they have and find a good placement. But field is a little unique in that we're working with agencies as well. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about what accommodations may look like for a student in field.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have done such a wide variety depending on where the student has been placed. Sometimes it's something as simple as the student needs a specific schedule. So maybe it's that they aren't able to work certain hours because of their disability or things like that. Sometimes it has been working with the student and the site on different types of technology. So there was a student a while ago who was required to handwrite their notes, and they physically could not handwrite their notes. And so we worked with the field director at the time and the site itself to figure out, okay, what technology can we use here that will be acceptable to the site and that will also meet the students' needs of being unable to physically handwrite their notes. So it really does range in terms of what students are requesting. Occasionally, we've also worked with sites about things like students needing breaks during the day. So perhaps students with medical conditions that need time to check their blood sugar and administer insulin, students who maybe get overwhelmed very easily and for every hour that they're working need a 5-minute break or things like that. So we really have tried to tailor it to the student, but not just the student, to the site that they're working at. And so if you are working with a student, Ryan, who is saying, I think that I might need X, Y, or Z, we are absolutely more than happy to participate in that conversation with you to see what types of accommodations we might be able to brainstorm that will work not only well for the student, but also for the site that they're being placed at. Does that help?
Great. Yes, just one quick follow-up. So that's great. And it's great to hear that you will work with the site as well. Obviously in these situations, it would be best if the student had the letter prior to being placed. Now,
Yes.
I think a lot of times that won't necessarily be the case. Just in terms of communicating this information, is it the student should be communicating the disability letter of accommodation to the field site, or just because I don't know if that's really my role to communicate that to a field site, or how does that what's the best way for that to be communicated?
Yeah, I think it would be great if in your application materials for a student, when they're applying for field, if there was some information in there directing students probably first to you, because I think that the conversation needs to be internal first. And I think sometimes students aren't, like I said, if they're coming in to meet with us, maybe even before they start their program, they're not always thinking about what they're going to need in a field placement. And so it may not be until they start applying for that they're like, oh, I might need something for this. And so making sure that we're having that conversation internally first, and then bringing that information to the site supervisor or to the site itself. And there may be some things that are very easy for us to just say, like, the student needs this, and so this is what we're going to do. Like, for instance, if a student can't work after 6 p.m. because of their medical condition, that might just be something that we can set up and we just arrange in and it's just done and there needs to be no conversation. But there may be other types of accommodations that really need to be worked out. And it might be different if the student has multiple placements. It might be different from one site to the other, depending on what type of work they're doing at the placements that they're at. So we're absolutely happy to help facilitate those accommodations. I think it's going to be best practice for it to really be starting internally first, and then kind of going from us to the site supervisor. And I would say, Ryan, depending on the relationship that you have built with the student and the student's level of confidence, sometimes students aren't always comfortable having that conversation on their own and may want some support. And in that case, we can certainly help be that support, or if you are willing to do that as well, that might be an opportunity to support the student through that.
Okay, great.
Oh.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Great questions.
And I just wanted to answer Nancy's question in the chat before it gets too far, before it disappears. So Nancy asked, what's the general time frame for students from application online to actually receiving an LOA? I really wish that I could say it was instant or short, but the unfortunate reality is that we are extraordinarily overwhelmed with students that are coming in the door right now. Within literally a 3-day period, we had over 30 registration forms, which is fantastic and great. And we're really glad that students are getting connected with us, but we have 5 coordinators and the intake appointments are an hour a piece. And so there's only so much time in a day. So I would say realistically right now, if a student got registered with us today, you're looking at probably 3 weeks, if not more, for them to get approved. I would say it might even be hinging on longer than that. One of the things that we also can do, let's say that a student approaches you and says, hey, I have a disability, I need extra time. And you say, great, do you have a letter from Disability Services? No, I haven't registered with them. Okay, you need to get registered with Disability Services, and then we can talk. If you're willing to give them additional time while they're in the process of registering with us, that's also okay. And we're happy to confirm for you that yes, the student took the step of filling out the registration form, and now they're just waiting in our process to be seen for an intake and to actually get things formalized. So if that's something that you are interested in doing, that's certainly your prerogative. And we'd always be happy to confirm for you, especially if the student says, hey, can you send my faculty member a letter saying I've started the process? We absolutely are happy to do that if you wanted that level of confirmation. Rachel, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to follow up to Ryan's questions about fields. First, to just say, I just really always appreciated conversations with ODS around fields. And I really appreciate that because every field situation is so different. And I appreciate the conversations that also ensure that our program requirements can be met and that like there may be accommodations that are not in line with our requirements, and then that requires another conversation. And so I kind of want to appreciate that space for those conversations. And on our planning forms, we do ask students if they anticipate accommodations. And so there's space for that. And so that's a starting point. But I guess my question would be like, is there a point of contact for field folks that, I know for me, like, I usually just I'm like, oh, Nikki's the last one who emailed me, so I'll email her or something. And so, or whoever I've talked to last, but like to coordinate unless the student, has a point of contact that they have a coordinator, but if they're newer, we don't know, who would you recommend that we reach out to more specifically to like engage in that conversation? Because I think with field in particular, like, as you guys know, like it can get really involved. And like, as Ryan was saying, like the placement process, like we don't want to set a student up in a placement that like can't meet that accommodation, or that there's just a lot of moving parts with all of it. So like the sooner we can have those conversations, even if there's not a formal accommodation, because sometimes it's like the like request versus accommodation, or kind of, and we've done a lot of that, and that's great, and we can try to do that, but to have formalize that. So I guess who would be the best person? You have a lot of people, we have a lot of people, like to coordinate those conversations, like through the field directors, the program directors, and then through your office.
Yeah. I'm going to volunteer myself and also our assistant director, Kathy Loder Murphy. Emailing either of us or both of us is going to be your easiest way to just simply get connected with our office. And we can help you figure out, is there a coordinator already assigned to this student? Is this a conversation that we can help you with? Do we need to bring in the court? So we can absolutely help facilitate that process.
Thank
you.
And
then Arlene had asked a question in the chat about how faculty should respond when students say they need accommodations, but do not want the stigma of registering with ODS. That is absolutely, unfortunately, very real. I wish that it was not. I wish that people with disabilities, students with disabilities, could just exist in this world and not have to be concerned about discrimination and stigma, but that is unfortunately not the reality that we are living in. So what I would really encourage you to do is make sure that the student understands them registering with our office is 100% a confidential process. It goes nowhere on any of their formal Rutgers documentation. That information is not shared with any other office without that student's consent. And even once they register, if they're choosing, let's say that they're in a very small discussion-based course that has no exams and their accommodation is for extra time on exams, they don't have to request an accommodation for that class, right? They're really the ones that are in charge of how their information is shared and who it is shared with. And so I think that making sure that students understand registering with us is confidential, and they have the power and they have the control as to how that information is then disseminated to others, if at all. So I'd still really encourage them to register. That obviously doesn't necessarily always take away the stigma, but that's probably the best thing that you can say to really try and encourage them to get in the door, is making sure that they understand that it's confidential. There are also some students who think that if they use accommodations, that their grade is going to have like an asterisk next to it or a mark next to it, like on their transcript, someone's going to be able to see like, oh, you used accommodations for this class. And that is absolutely not true. Even if a student activates their accommodations, uses them, shares their letter of accommodation with a faculty, that information really should not even be shared beyond that student-faculty relationship, right? So it's not something that is going to appear on their transcript or that someone else would know down the road. Arlene, did you have another question? And then yes, we can absolutely talk about long COVID.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming. We're so lucky to have both of you. And here in Student Affairs, as soon as students begin to be admitted to the program, we try to stress to them, if you need accommodations, get them now, set them up now. If you don't need to use them, don't use them. But again, we try to stress they're not, if you have accommodations, they're not retroactive. So it's not, don't wait until Thanksgiving to get them for that final assignment. So we do stress that. I think I tell students that it is not unusual at all for social work students to register, have accommodations through your department. It kind of makes sense in a way. And, we're all about squashing that stigma, and we do stress confidentiality. Faculty should know I am not given the letters. I am so often involved, and sometimes students will tell me. It comes up frequently if there's students who run into some kind of academic difficulty, or there's another academic related issue. It'll come to my attention that a student has accommodations, but I don't automatically receive notifications. So it is extremely confidential, and you can stress that with students. I am able to call Carly and say, we have a student here. Is she registered with your department? Have they been in touch with you? And then Carly's able to tell me yes, but of course I'm not given any additional information. I do have a question that I wish that you would discuss. And I think there's some confusion sometimes among students, often among faculty, and definitely among advisors. If a student, and this is very common in our program with our demographics of our students, if a student is pregnant and tells a faculty member that they're pregnant and is asking for accommodations, please advise us about the best steps and which departments here at Rutgers actually are the appropriate ones to refer students to.
Yeah, I'm really
Great
glad that you brought
question.
that up. And before I answer that about pregnancy, I'm actually going to go back a step to something else you just said, Arlene, because I'm really glad that you mentioned, that even if our office does confirm that, yes, a student has been in touch with us, one of the things that whether a student has a letter of accommodation or not, whether they've only initially contacted us or gone through the full process, one of the things we will never disclose without the student's full explicit permission is why they have accommodations. So even if a student goes through the whole process and shares that letter of accommodations, we will never share why unless the student is choosing to do so or would like us to do so. So that's sometimes also a way to help remove some of that stigma or fear of students registering with our office is that they sometimes think, well, I don't want everybody to know my business. Well, everybody doesn't have to know your business. Just the coordinator that you're talking to needs to know your business. And even then, we don't need to know all of it, just enough to be able to approve accommodations. But in terms of pregnancy, our office will typically not work with students who are pregnant unless there is some type of a pregnancy related disability complication that comes up. For the most part, students who are pregnant should be working with the Title IX office. And they are the ones who will be able to make sure that that student is able to, you know, take a leave if they need it. They're able to get different furniture if they need it. They're able to find lactation stations when they come back to campus if they need it. They're able to really support them throughout that process. And we will certainly attempt to help if a student errantly comes our way, but generally what we're doing is sending that student over to talk to the Title IX folks, and they're able to help with that.
And then I'll put in my quick plug for the work that you're doing as social workers. How do we bring that dialogue into those spaces so that we're addressing disability? So that question that you have, Dean Hunter, is, you know, people who are concerned about identifying. So what is that for that person with a disability? We work with students who are going through trauma or have trauma, different vulnerable populations. So the work as social workers on a meso level, and then even a bigger level of, so maybe there's some changes that can, you know, you can do into those spaces to explore that. Why is that? So that's sort of on an academic level, you can take that in, because you have some boundaries. I see that question. I see, well, instructors have some boundaries and limits and conversations that they want to have. Disability services has their place. So, and then there is this overlooming of stigma and vulnerability and ability to talk about it.
And I also just want to address thank you, Nikki. I wanted to make sure that we address the long-term COVID question. So this is something that is new and emerging for us as much as it is for anyone else. We have been attending multiple webinars and done multiple trainings about, you know, what is long-term COVID, what are the effects of long-term COVID. But at the end of the day, no matter what you call it, what we're looking at for students is what is currently impacting you. And I think the biggest way that long COVID might be a little bit different than other types of disabilities is that we may see more provisional accommodations. So for the most part, when a student comes forward and says, I have a learning disability, I need extra time on tests, great, here's your accommodations, they're approved for the duration of your academic career here at Rutgers. But as students are coming forward with long COVID, so much of this for them is unknown. They're still struggling to try and come to terms with what's happening, what's going on. I've got this brain fog and this is what my doctor says it is, but I don't know how long it's going to last. And so what we have been noticing ourselves doing a little bit more often is saying, okay, well, let's do some provisional accommodations. So let's address what you're facing right now. This is what you're facing right now. This is what's documented. This is what you're telling us. Here are some accommodations that will help now, but let's touch base in a semester. Let's touch base in a year and get updated documentation and see how you're doing at that point and see if things have changed or see if they're stable. So that's one way that we're working with students who are experiencing long COVID, but it's a learning process for us as well. But it just really goes back to the work that we do is so individualized that we're just applying that same process and working with students with whatever it is that they're experiencing.
Thank you for that, Carly, because I had a student bring that up to me today, and she began to say, well, can I do Zoom? She was like, I might fall asleep. I said, oh no. I said, you have to go to the accommodate. I said, you got to talk to the accommodations office. I said, you go to ODS. So I said, you need to get it in your LOA so that I can know exactly what I need to do. And she said, you just can't do it. And so that's why I was like, oh no, I need you to go talk to them so we can make sure we're meeting your needs and getting you what you need.
Yeah, and
I had never heard of that before. And so I just want to make sure I was sending them to the right place.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I think that's something you as instructors and as a department could think about, because if a student were to ask that as accommodation, you know, looking at your class, the learning outcomes, the design of it, does it make sense that that's a reasonable accommodation for that class? Or if not, then why? And having that,
Yeah. Well,
thinking
sleep
about
is
that
never an
beforehand before
option.
we ask. Mhm.
Making sleep is never an option.
Oh, no, not sleep. Yeah, that wouldn't be well. Mhm.
Nicole, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. So I work in our field office, and I've seen occasionally the students write the wrong person as the instructor for the course. So sometimes it goes to our field liaison, who is not in a grading role, and it should be going to whoever in our department would be that student's grader. So I'm just curious, if we see that, what should we do? Or is there anything that we should be doing ahead of it so the student notes the right person to get the letter? Because
Yeah.
while I hope I'm getting all of them, that could be a glitch.
Yeah, so it would be really helpful because where that email actually generates from is from sort of our main front office email account. So if you were to reply all would probably be the best way to do that, so that the student also knows that this is going to now be going to somebody else, and to just say, hey, I noticed that this letter was sent to Professor Hubbard and it actually needs to be sent to Professor Hunter. Could you please, make sure that it gets sent to them? And we can absolutely reissue the letter of accommodation to whoever the correct person is. Students are often pulling this information from whatever source they can find. So we've noticed this semester in particular, as students are becoming more familiar with Canvas and as Canvas is becoming more prevalent, they're logging into their Canvas course, seeing who's listed in Canvas, and then submitting an LOA for that. But Canvas has actually been wrong in a couple of cases in terms of who the actual instructor is. So a way that you could possibly address that would be in any type of a syllabus or class announcement where you say, hey, students that are working with the Office of Disability Services, please share your letters of accommodation with, and then list who you would like that shared with. And hopefully students are reading the syllabus and looking at the announcements, and can then have that information to be able to send it to the right person. But if it gets to the wrong person, we can absolutely reissue that. The other thing that we are now able to do is that if you have a specific course code for the field classes that you're overseeing, I'm also able to let you know if you're needing a list of accommodations, what students have requested an LOA for that specific course code. So like we have some departments, for instance, that they have a department administrator that actually sets all the extended time. It's not done per faculty necessarily. And so I'm able to say, confirm, yep, these are the students that have requested a letter of accommodation for this course code. So you now, department administrator, can set their additional time.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And I see Rachel in the chat because I was just about to say it. Yeah, we will probably get you a list because we have a lot of course codes.
Yeah, I would
Carly,
just
is that-
ask that you maybe wait a week or so just to make sure that we were able to get through this initial wave that we're processing now.
Great.
Carly, is that something that's like across the board? Just thinking, just following up maybe for Arlene as well here, like, is that like that if we set like, I mean, we have all of our course codes, like, is that something that we could get as a school then in terms of?
There is, but there needs to be an educational need to know. So the reason that we would do it for department admin is because they're literally the ones setting the extended time. So we would never just share accommodations letters.
Right, but
with
for
like school administrators without a direct need to know, because again, we're then breaking that student's
sure
level of confidentiality of, well, I said that I wanted this to go to my faculty member, and now this is being shared with 3 other people.
Gotcha. And so how would that work? There's a follow-up question on that. So if say for extra time, so say we did ask for that report, it's like that we could then on in the instructional design side, just like get it set up for everyone. But like if the student never shared their letter with the faculty member and we gave them at like, so like,
Well,
so we would.
So you actually, the letters now go directly to the faculty when the student requests it.
Okay, so then they automatically are getting that accommodation.
Yes, well, so when a student places their request now, it used to be that the letter would go to the student would need to share it with their faculty. Our office is now emailing the student and the faculty at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So the faculty member is
Right.
already immediately getting that
So
letter.
for time on exams, like that's very straightforward. There's not really an extra conversation for like the extra time within like 48 hours. Like that's more, but so as a school, I'm just thinking logistically, like if that's something, and I don't know, Arlene, maybe we can talk more about this, about like if that would make sense to like set it up and Patricia too, like on the back end, like in the courses. So then it's like faculty don't have to, then it's just done by our instructional
And-
designers. Is
and
that
there
something that
are-
you're seeing folks doing? Is that?
On a very limited basis. So the School of Nursing would be the prime example for that. Like the School of Nursing in Camden right now, they literally have one person that for the whole School of Nursing sets additional time for exams.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean, and we've generally like, I mean, some folks know how to do it in Canvas, and then others like kind of come to me or our ID team to do it. So we've been really clear, like when we get that request, we're like, do you have a letter of accommodation? Like, we're not just like going in and like, kind of doing things, but all right, that's interesting. I might follow up with some questions later on that.
yeah, absolutely. And it's really, I mean, we're still learning what our capabilities are with this too, because it's still a relatively new technology for us. So we're absolutely happy to talk with folks about different use cases about how this might be able to be more easily implemented. But again, it really goes back for us to that concept of we don't want the letter shared beyond the student and the faculty member without an educational need to know.
Gotcha.
And so that's really kind of the philosophy that drives what we're doing with this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I know that we only have a couple minutes left. I wanted to make sure that I've captured appropriately. I have Marion, Rachel, and Tawanda, I have your names written down. I will send you the link to access the faculty portal. I also saw that Sierra and Marla had let me know that they were having some issues. So I'll follow up with both of you directly after this too, just to see what's going on and how we can maybe help you with that. But if there's anyone else that might need assistance, I'm actually going to put my email address right in the chat so that you can follow up with me directly, and I'm happy to help.
That's great. If you see any like systematic issues, let us know, because we might have new people who haven't accessed it before, but let me know if there's anything I can send out more broadly to people.
Great.
What other questions? I mean, Carly and I talked about, I think we've touched on everything that you and I talked about outside of physical accommodations too, to classrooms. Like if someone needs a larger seat or a table that can be moved away from a chair.
Yeah, so I've had these conversations with Arlene a couple times, so she knows how frustrated I get by the fact that, in my opinion, I do not think that a student who is simply larger statured should have to register with the Office of Disability Services in order to get a different desk. I think that is ludicrous. However, if that's what it takes, I am more than happy to work with facilities and get that poor student an additional desk. But Arlene and I have been able to troubleshoot a couple of those situations. So if you do have a student who does not necessarily have a physical disability, but is simply just a larger person and needs a separate desk, chair, etc., that's absolutely something that Arlene can work with you on. She can always come to me if she's having issues getting of something in the building. But then Nikki and I, especially Nikki, works very closely with our facilities team for students that have registered with our office, because there are some students who, due to maybe they're a wheelchair user, and so they need an adjustable height table or things like that. And we work with facilities in advance of the semester starting, ideally, to make sure that, classrooms are deemed to be accessible for that student, that accessible furniture is in that classroom for the student if they need it. But sometimes, unfortunately, things get moved at the last minute and we don't know, or a student changes their schedule at the last minute. And so we're scrambling to make some last minute adjustments.
I will add on to that, Carly, too, because you have some buildings that are non-Rutgers property. So I believe that person has changed. So if that were the case, I'd be reaching out to that person to try to get whatever in your downtown buildings, because facilities, it's different there, but we would still want to see if, and that could be easier because you have different chairs in those spaces that are usually tagged.
Yeah, we actually made sure that they were accessible, and we bought
Right.
tables and larger chairs and all, but yeah, we're in the process of trying to identify a new facilities person for us. So if you reach out, if you need help, find me, we can connect you. I think Tawanda might have our last question of the day.
So last year I had a student that I was working with Arlene with, who was of a larger stature. And I just want to bring up, we had asked for a couple of desks. They only brought one. And my student she would not sit there because she felt that it would bring more attention to her. And she was of a bigger size and she had a hard time. I mean, it broke my heart every time, her coming to class earlier just to fit in. So none of the students would see her. And I told her, I sat in the chair when we watched the video. I opened it up for other students to sit in the chair, tried to do any and everything to make her feel a little bit comfortable. But she really had some reactions to it. And she said, I really wish there was more desks. I said, I asked, I'm so sorry. And I was blowing up Arlene's email, but it's something for us to think about, that maybe we should just offer diversity of seating in classrooms. And
Yeah.
I don't know who all can sitting at tables to advocate for that, but I think that's something we should be looking to just do for students, right? Not everybody's a size 1. So we need to be mindful of diversity and body size.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Amen.
this
Yeah.
was the case that we were talking about, and I was told, we need to submit the person has to have a disability. It's like, are you kidding me? So no, Carly has been really on the ball with facilities. Her department has, and that area, and others. Right, we're not all a size 1 or even a size 8. So yes, thanks for pointing that out. We'll continue to work on those things together.
Great. Well, I thank you all for all of your questions. I always learn so much from ODS when I have a chance to interact with you guys. I thank you all the faculty for participating.